Hello and welcome. My name is Elisa Guerra, and I am delighted to have you all here to talk about what danger can it be when we use several different labels that we will explore today to try to define our children that have specific needs and if they have been going through these labels, what is the danger, what can happen. Here from the beautiful campus of the institutes, I want to welcome to this session our director, Janet Doman. She is also the author and co-author of several books on child brain development. And we are very grateful to have her here with us today to speak about this topic. Why are these labels dangerous to our children? Janet, welcome.
Thank you, Lisa. We chose this topic because it's such a barrier and it is such a problem for our children, and it has been for so many years that we thought, well, let's open the door on this so our parents can understand why these labels are dangerous. And indeed, my father, the founder of the institutes, called these labels libels, because once
Yes.
they are attached to a child, they have a libelous effect. And we'll take a look at that.
Yes, but before we get deep into the waters of this topic, that I am sure it's going to be very interesting to our parents joining us today, I would like to ask you, Janet, if we could start just by going maybe through a little tour of who we are here in the institutes, what we do. Let's start with maybe welcoming our parents to our beautiful campus in Philadelphia.
Well, I do think it's a good idea. I know there are new people aboard today, so we want you to know about the institutes. I hope the parents who come to these webinars regularly will forgive us a few minutes to do that. Here we are on the campus, and this is our main building, Clark Hall. Children do come here from all over the world, and they come because they have very significant problems, and we'll look at what those problems are. They range all the way from kids who may be in a coma to children who may be paralyzed or blind or deaf or speechless, to children who may walk and talk but have huge problems of focus, attention, interest, concentration, to children who are simply behind. They're progressing, but much, much more slowly than their brothers and sisters, and children who may be in school, but first grade is going badly, second grade is going even worse, all the way to kids who may have a mild reading problem. So the range of the children who we see, it's a huge range of children, but they all have one important thing in common, and we'll talk about what that is. Our parents come from over 100 nations, and they come here to learn about child brain development and what they can do right at home with their kid to see their kid change every day.
So
That's who we
this is a place for parents and for children. And we're going to see a short video that takes us a little bit on the ground of the campus, and maybe we can narrate what we are watching.
Well, again, here we are at Clark Hall, beautiful old building, the main building on our campus, created by Jay Cook back in 1910. Here we are at the north side of Clark Hall, and we're actually moving up toward what was my father's office for many, many years. Beautiful, beautiful Glaston Conservatory, and it's now, I'm happy to say, my office. And we're just very lucky to have this beautiful campus, which our parents refer to as Fort Sanity. And I think it's a good name. My father loved the name. And the minute the first parent called it that, from that moment on, he always referred to this beautiful campus as Fort Sanity. Here we are in a building we built almost 50 years ago. This is the Valentine Auditorium. And again, this is a critical building for us because this is where we teach our parents and they learn about child brain development. Here we are in the back of Clark, and we're moving to the Children's Center. And this is our clinic where we see our parents. We had kids here all week this week. It came from 5 different nations, and just a lovely shot looking down from Clark Hall. So just a little taste.
A
of-
little taste. It's beautiful every season of the year. Right now it's green and lush, but it's also beautiful when it's covered in snow. So this is in Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania, where the institutes were founded in 1955 by your father, by Glenn Doman, which is also author of this book that we recommend to our families, what to do about your brain injured kid. So let's begin to bite into our topic. Who are the children that we see in the institutes? Who are our children?
Well, let's look at a few of our kids and let's look at them with the labels that the world has put on those kids before they come here. This is a very common label, beautiful little boy. And his diagnosis before coming here would have been cerebral palsy. This is a very common diagnosis. This is a term that goes back many, many, many years. So we're going to talk about these kids. And again, there are thousands of such kids. Primarily, their problems are mobility and speech. They're very, very bright kids. And we'll talk about why this term, cerebral palsy, is such a curious one and not very informative. Well, here's a group of kids that's gigantic and apparently growing bigger every second. This group of kids, as with the cerebral palsy kids, has a very wide range from kids who cannot talk, cannot use their hands, cannot function very well at all the way to kids who at the very top of this group will be kids who are highly capable, but whose concentration, whose interest, whose attention may be a big problem, and many, many kids in between. And we'll talk about this label. We see kids who have been diagnosed with developmental delay. Sometimes it's the diagnosis is global developmental delay. This is probably a huge catch-all term. It includes almost any kid given another label will almost certainly be given this label at the same time. And I think that's one of the most distressing things for parents, that not only will they be given a label, but sometimes they're given 2 or 3, or we've seen kids with 5 labels on one little kid. So this one, yes, we see kids who are, this is the given diagnosis.
Here we come to another one.
Attention deficit disorder, ADHD, ADD, whatever letters you want to use here. Again, this group again embraces kids with many, many different problems, and they struggle tremendously, especially in a classroom. These kids will be, for our teachers, a big, big, big concern. And yes, we see many kids who have had this label, and again, often with global developmental delay, or often with, autism. So you get not one label, but 2 or 3.
You get the sense or the feeling that your child has not one condition, but many conditions. And sometimes parents say, how was my son so unlucky
Yes.
that he got not one, but 2, 3, 4, or even more different
Yeah,
conditions?
you have to kind of postulate a God who hates children and has visited so many catastrophic conditions on one innocent little child. Yeah, I think that's true.
Yes, and I think that this was like a short tour, a short trip uh, through these labels, but there are many, many, many more, right?
I think we missed a label there.
We did. Let me see.
We did.
Oh,
There
yeah.
you go. And I have included this one, and probably people will wonder about it. We'll come back and talk. Look at that sweet boy. Um, yes, this is again uh, a label that our kids are given, and this label has a history. When I was young, these kids were often called mongoloids, and before that, when my father was young, they were called mongoloid idiots. um, the labeling that has gone on over many, many years in a world that has been essentially ignorant has been, for our kids, pretty catastrophic. Because in the days when these kids were being labeled mongoloid, it was commonplace for a, this baby to arrive in the nursery, in the hospital, and go straight from the nursery to an institution. He never even was picked up by his mom or dad, taken home to meet his no, straight from the hospital to the institution. So if we wanted one kid who represents the danger of
Yes.
these insane labels, I think this kid especially, this label to this day will cause, if mother knows she's pregnant with this little baby, mothers tell us, and I'm appalled to say this is still happening right now as we speak, when mothers are told that they're going to have a baby with trisomy 21, they tell us that from the moment they're given that information, there will be healthcare professionals coming at them, whether it's the nurse, whether it's a doctor, whether it's a specialist, whether it's a well-intended relative, coming at mother to say, oh, you don't have to keep this baby. This baby's going to be a big problem. This baby's going to take up too much of your time. This baby's going to cost a lot of money. I mean, mothers say the things people will say to you are really astonishing. And of course, do you think that makes that pregnancy stressful? With mother having to say over and over and over again, this is my baby. We're talking about my baby right now. Like, let's have this conversation somewhere else because I don't want my baby to hear this. Um, you know, it's it it's amazing once you have a label, how that can insulate you from the normal human caring and concern that should be provoked by knowing, oh, mom's pregnant and she's going to have a child who may have some problems, but not just, well, you could do him in. So I think that this kid, I've included him because he is uniquely vulnerable to the dangers of a label right from the moment we know he's coming. Now,
The earliest label.
I have to say, to put a much better um, PS on this story, the great thing, of course, is that once mother discovers she's pregnant, discovers she's going to have a trisomy 21 baby, she can get on our waiting list, and she does. So this kid can arrive here right at birth or shortly thereafter, and mother can be in touch with us throughout that pregnancy. So she has the support she needs rather than the world ganging up on an innocent baby and saying, well, the world would be better off without him, when we know just the opposite is true. I mean, look at that. Look at that guy.
I have seen many parents that when coming to the institutes, maybe with a child like the ones with the labels that you described before, Janet, like cerebral palsy, for example, and they come to the institutes and the child is already 5 or 8 or 10 or 20, and they said, oh my gosh, had I known earlier, had I had I found you earlier? And sometimes there is an advantage of when you know from the very, very beginning, sometimes even before pregnancy,
Yes.
that there is a problem, because then you can get ready to fix the
Yeah.
problem as soon
Mhm.
as you can, as soon as the baby arrives.
Yeah.
Okay, but we will talk about this later, and of course in many other episodes to come.
Yes. It's a
But
big
we were
subject.
saying that these are just a
A
handful of
handful of the
labels.
labels. I picked these out because these are such common ones and they embrace thousands of kids. But the last time we went through the literature, and we do this about every 10 years, there were more than 350 symptomatic labels.
And they
Now,
keep growing, right?
and it, it's a nauseating process. These 350 symptomatic labels create a kind of swamp that
Mhm.
our parents have to wade through looking for what is the answer to my child, because these are presented as if they are a diagnosis.
And they
They
are
are presented
symptomatic
as if
labels.
that's right. They're symptomatic labels. They've taken one symptom or maybe a
Mhm.
group of symptoms and use that as a label. And that's the problem. You cannot have a symptomatic label as a substitute for a real diagnosis. We all know that when there is a problem in life, the first thing you must do is name the problem and say what the problem is. Then, and only then, we have the opportunity to say, okay, what could be possible solutions to this problem? But if we don't name the problem, then we're going to be chasing our tails forever. And that's what we see with our families. Weeks, months, years are wasted chasing the symptomatic label, using palliative care that doesn't solve the problem. So these labels are uniformly
Mhm.
a disaster. Let's look at the first one. Let's look at cerebral palsy. This was
Yes.
a label that drove the great Temple Fay, really the founder of our work, the great Temple Fay, right here in the city of Philadelphia, very, very famous neurosurgeon. It drove him crazy. He used to get all of his fellow neurosurgeons and neurologists together and say, listen, we have to stop using this term cerebral palsy. First of all, cerebral, these children are not injured in that area of the brain. So, first of all, we have the wrong area of the brain. These children are injured in the midbrain, the subcortical areas of the brain. So, we should not be using this. We've got the wrong part of the anatomy. Well, that's pretty serious, I would say. The second thing he pointed out with cerebral palsy is that the word palsy means paralyzed.
Mhm.
You can't have a paralyzed cerebrum. The cerebrum, as with the entire brain, has no moving parts. We all have a paralyzed brain. All of us have brains that sit in a skull, they don't move. So, this is an illiterate use of the term palsy. So he begged his fellows, he said, these are midbrain injured kids, pure and simple, and we should be referring to the midbrain. That's where they're hurt.
Okay. So that's take one. Let's go to a different label, and let's go around the labels that you used before.
Well, this one probably is the most devastating of all the labels because it is utterly meaningless. I mean, if you look up this word and
Autistic.
you won't believe the nonsense that is there. I don't know who came up with it, but it is the most meaning. And yet, words are powerful. And this word has been used and used and used. So, this word, more than probably any other word in the English language, will strike fear into the heart of a mother more deeply and more profoundly than it. And yet, it is nonsense. It is absolute, utter nonsense. It doesn't even describe, it's supposed to describe a symptom, which is being overly interested in oneself as a definition. I don't know about you, but I have to be overly interested in the morning when I do my hair. I have to put a lot of attention on it. So I suppose during that time, I'm autistic. But, this is ridiculous. These kids have gigantic problems. They have visual problems. They have auditory problems. They have tactile problems. These problems create chaos for them. And because they have problems with taste and smell, if you have this kid, you can take a piece of paper and start writing. If I say to you, write all the things that are driving you crazy about this kid, parents will write 300 things, because just about from the moment this kid wakes up till the moment he goes to sleep, he's kind of a disaster. He's kind of a disaster. But he's a disaster because of all of his sensory problems. When we understand those sensory problems, and we understand they all originate in the brain, this child is treated as if he's crazy.
Oh,
As
yes.
if it's all about his behavior. And we try to kind of con him out of his behavior problems. But he's not a behavior problem. He has a problem in the brain. And we must address those problems. If we fix his auditory problems and his tactile problems and his sensory, all the sensory problems, if we address those problems, we see him change dramatically. This child, this group of children have very big physiological problems. They have problems in the gut. And those gut problems affect their behavior tremendously. But again, you can't treat him as if it's his behavior and ignore the gut.
Yes.
If you treat the gut, the bad behavior that everybody's driven insane by will go away. I mean,
If you treat the symptoms, you will get,
that's
of
right.
course, you will get it.
All those 300 symptoms, everybody wants to be treating those symptoms. And, when
Just
parents come, they will say to us, well, how are you going to treat this? And how are you treating this? And how are you treating this? I say
a
300
different
things, right?
therapy for everything. Yeah.
And we answer them very clearly. We're not going to address any of those things because it's not this kid's problem. He's not stupid. He's not crazy. He's brain injured. We're going to
Uh,
fix his brain.
I wanted to point out two little things. One is that these labels keep changing, as you were saying, with the mongoloid child that then became the Down syndrome child, that then became the trisomy 21 child. And regarding that, we have here a comment from Laura. Thank you, Laura, for being here. And look at what she's saying. I was told that it was irresponsible of me not to get an immediate confirmation via amniocentesis because I was running out of time to terminate, as
I mean,
if termination was the only possible.
imagine on top, any pregnant mom, she's thrilled, but she's also worried. Of course,
Of course.
mothers are worriers. And imagine on top of the concern that you have a trisomy 21 kid, imagine putting a clock in her head, ticking, tick, 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 tick.
Mhm.
Every second, you've got one more second left to terminate that, two more seconds. I mean, I just can't imagine what's the computation, what's the thinking way of a world that thinks this way. I've never, in my 55 years, I have never, here at the Institute, I've never once met a family of a trisomy 21 kid who didn't regard that kid as the greatest blessing their family ever had. They're the most adored children in the world. And in fact, the biggest problem we have is, they're very smart kids and they'll run the family if they're allowed to. So
Became
our
little
problem is not that their families don't love them. Our families is we say, this guy's the prince and it's time to dethrone him, you know. But
they are
it's,
very smart.
it's just appalling. And I'm horrified that mother had that. We need to make our own institute support group, I think, for all mothers who
For
find out
sanity.
tomorrow that they're going to have a trisomy 21 kid, to say, congratulations, because wait till you see what your kid's capable of. It's spectacular.
Look, also Carito is making a comment. Absolutely true. They are a blessing. By the way, parents and mothers, fathers, caregivers that are here with us today, We are going to have, of course, at the end of this session, we're going to have time to answer your questions. So thank you for your comments. If you have questions, we received some questions beforehand by email when we sent out this invitation. And of course, you are always more than welcome. When you receive the invitation, if you are part of our mailing list, if you receive the invitation to these seminars that are going to be coming every month or so, you feel free to send in your questions beforehand. And also, if you are here live with us today, please begin to type your questions because we will get some time to answer those questions.
Yeah.
So, shall we continue with our parade of labels? Insanity parade.
Well, as I said earlier, this one is the greatest catch-all. This is the kid who mother sees is falling further and further behind. She often picks this up very early, 18 months, 20 months. She starts going to the doctor saying he's behind, and the doctor pats her on the head and says, "Stop worrying. You worry too much. Don't compare one child with another. He'll catch up." And mother decides after she's had 3 of those appointments that she's going to find a different doctor because her child is not catching up. Her child is, and the doctor always says, "Stop. You worry too much. Don't compare one child to another." Of course, mothers compare one child to another. Of course they do. That's an insane piece of advice. Um, and so she then goes to another doctor, and this doctor says, "Oh," she says, "he's behind." And this doctor says, "Well, just so you know, um, he's always going to be behind. This is who he is, and you should don't worry so much. Love him the way he is because he's not going to change. Accept him the way he is because he's never going to change." So one doctor says, "Stop worrying. He's fine. He'll catch." The other doctor says, "He's hopeless." Same kid, same mother. This is the insanity that mothers live through. So basically, this is as meaningless as it can be, because when the doctor says, "Well, your child has global developmental delay," mother says to herself, "I just told you that. That's what I told you when I came in the office. I told you he's behind everybody else. I know that. I need to know why. Where is his problem? And what are we going to do about it?" So this is that big catch-all term. And there are literally millions of kids out there whose mothers are tearing out their hair saying, "What is this? Well, why is he developmentally delayed? Where is the problem? Where is the problem?" Because, by the way, all of these mothers, doesn't matter what the label is, all of these mothers look at their kid and they see the potential.
Yes.
They
Over and
see
over.
they see the future in their kids' eyes in a good way, not a bad way. That's one of I think the most frustrating things is that the doctor looks into his crystal ball and sees this he'll never walk, he'll never talk, he'll never be able to read, he'll never do what other kids do. I don't know where they got that crystal ball. We don't have any crystal ball. We can't look into our kid's future and say this is where he's going to be in a year and this is where he's going to be in 2 years.
Or he
We
will
don't
never do this or do
have,
that.
but these people have a crystal ball, and in it, it's such a dark crystal ball. If I had a crystal ball like that, I'd get rid of it. They only see dark things. For us, we are the opposite. We evaluate our kids very carefully and look to see how can we make changes and what goals we can give that child for 6 months from now, 8 months from now, 10 months from now. So
Well,
no crystal ball, just a fighting chance. Let's change this kid. Let's see him change every day. And that's what
I
mothers do.
I see that the questions are piling up. So
Okay.
we will get moving and we will get back to you, Rinel, Jolise. We see your questions. We will get back to them. We're going to advance now to our another labels and another way to look at these labels to
Well,
because they're
again, this kid is everywhere. Teachers have been gnashing their teeth over this kid for easily 50 years. And again, we've taken some of his prominent symptoms: poor attention, poor concentration, and we have zeroed in on them. And what have we done as a solution? We've gone to the medicine cabinet and found an amphetamine there and are giving an amphetamine to little kids. I mean, when people talk about let's not go down the slippery slope, when we're regularly prescribing amphetamines for our children as a solution to a neurological problem, we're at the bottom of that slippery slope. I mean, if you can imagine, here are kids who are neurologically disorganized. They are neurologic. Do you think the brain is going to be aided by an amphetamine or made worse? Because I can assure you, our world-class researchers say if parents could see what amphetamines do to the brain, they wouldn't touch it. So these kids get medicated. We found a new way to handle kids in a classroom. Oh, he's not behaving the way we want. We put him on millions of prescriptions for a drug that if you and I were caught peddling that drug, we'd be arrested and put away. And now we have our children who don't want to take the drug, putting it in plastic bags and selling it at recess.
Oh, yes.
You know, I mean, that's the craziness of the world we live in. When this kid, first of all, this kid is not stupid. He's not lazy. He's not crazy. He is disorganized and very bright. Very, 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 very bright. So, you know, what the world thinks of him is completely backwards. Completely backwards.
I like
Mm.
very much that you use these words, lazy, crazy, stupid, because we have a question coming, one of the questions that came through email that addresses exactly that, what you're saying, Janet. And now we're back to Down syndrome.
Yeah, and for this child, you might wonder why we've put this child here at all, because everybody, I think, in the world knows this child's problem is genetic. So we don't treat genes. We never have in history. I think we never will. It's not what we do. So why would we dare be treating this child? Well, in the old days, we didn't. If you go back 50 years, we did not accept trisomy 21 kids on our program because we said their problem, they're the only kids who arrived here with a proper diagnosis. They do have a problem that's genetic. It is diagnosed before they come. So how is it that we're talking about this kid? It was inevitable 50 years ago that parents of these kids who were being told to institutionalize them at birth, it was inevitable that they would appear on our doorstep. And they did. And when they did, they said to my father, look, we know our kid has a genetic problem, and we know you don't fix genetic problems, but he's our baby. And you do things with babies. You do good things with babies. Couldn't you help us? We're willing to do whatever it is that you think would be helpful, then we think it will help. Well, my father is not a person who's good at saying no. He did say yes to that first set of parents and the next set and the next set. And in the end, when we evaluated these children, to our surprise, on our developmental profile, they looked just like other midbrain injured children. We designed a program for a midbrain injured child, put those kids on those programs, and they came back doing beautifully. Now, that's a broad brushstroke. That's a generalization. These are not cookie cutter kids. And we've seen some trisomy 21 kids who were blind and paralyzed. Mm-hmm. So not many, because that's really not the extreme, but we have seen it. But as a group, when we intervene with stimulation and opportunity, they do incredibly well. What does that mean? It means that, yes, they have a genetic problem, and that's the source of the problem, but that genetic problem somewhere in utero causes a neurological problem, causes injury to the brain. That is treatable. We know how to fix that. And it turns out, of those two problems, the bigger problem is the injury to the brain. Because when we fix it, the kid can go to school, he can read, he can write, He can sing, he can dance, he can do what his brothers and sisters can do. So I think this child was a real gift to us because now we see many kids come to us with genetic problems. And in the old days, we would have thought, well, we can't really help this. And the prognoses are terrible. Oh, this kid will never walk. This kid will never talk. Kid is one of only 8 kids on the planet that have this genetic problem. We have learned to look past that, evaluate, design a program, and see how much stimulation and opportunity will help that child. And we found, just like the trisomy 21 kids, these genetic kids have a secondary injury to the brain. This we can treat.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's very important because as we get better and better at diagnosing genetic problems, more and more kids come with that on their medical records.
And I can sense, because of some of the comments, that parents are already on the edge of their seats. So if we don't call them uh, autistic or cerebral palsy or Down syndrome, what is the alternative? Why is this so important? What will be then a proper diagnosis?
Yeah, and I don't want to leave this discussion without saying what is a proper diagnosis. A proper diagnosis has to tell you at least 3 things. It has to tell you what is the degree. Sorry, we skipped one here.
Oh,
There
yes.
it is. Where is the problem? Where is the problem? Is the problem in the kidney? Is the problem in the heart? Oh, is the problem in the brain? We have this crazy thing in our society where we don't want to call a kid brain injured. We'll call them anything before we'll call them brain injured. But all the kids we've just looked at, they're all injured in the central nervous system, in the brain.
Mm-hmm.
They're all injured in the brain. So first of all, we have to say it's in the brain. It's not the elbow. It's not the knee. It's not the kidney. It's not the heart. Because parents come to us and they say, oh, I want your help, but my kid's not brain injured. And we say, oh, gee, what's wrong? Oh, my kid is autistic. And we say, where do you think that problem originates? Do you think he has a heart problem? Do you think he has a knee problem? Do you think he has a kidney problem? Well, the truth is, everybody, when you push, everybody knows the problem is in the brain, but no one wants to say that. So
It's not
first and foremost,
politically correct.
everyone's afraid of the brain. And this is ridiculous because the brain runs everything. And everyone's afraid if it's in the brain, it can't be changed. The
Yes.
brain is the most plastic of all our organs. It runs everything. And the brain is changing. Here's how much the brain changes. From the instant of post-conception where we have a brain, all the way to the second before we die, the brain is changing. It's responding to the environment. It's taking in stimulation and opportunity. It's the most changeable organ of the body. Next slide. We have to say where the problem is, and we also have to say, what is the degree? Is this child profoundly hurt, severely hurt, moderately hurt, mildly hurt? That degree is important. And parents want to know that. We want to know what's the degree of injury. Next slide. And you also want to know the extent. We skipped step 1. What's the
There.
extent? In the brain, is it focal? Is it just in one area very intensely, as it would be with a bullet to the brain? Or is it diffuse? Is it over the brain? And those would be the 3 parts of a good diagnosis. Let's just run this test through our little cerebral palsy. So this child, who
For
the world
example.
calls cerebral palsy, this absurd term, this child would be diagnosed, next slide, as a severe, that's the degree, diffuse, not focal, bilateral, both sides of the brain, injured in the midbrain, subcortical areas of the brain. So here's a proper diagnosis: severe, diffuse, bilateral, midbrain injury. That's who that kid is. And once we know that, then we have a start to say, how are we going to fix that? What stimulation does this child need? What opportunity to change that midbrain?
Oh,
Okay.
okay. Okay. Now, hold on. How can parents get to this diagnosis, and how can they know what they can do about this? Because of course, if we change the name, if we give a proper diagnosis, we will say that we want to do that for some reason, and that reason will be to be able to do something about it, right? So
Of course.
how how can parents arrive to this position to know what's really the problem, and to know what steps they need to follow to solve this problem?
Well, I think that the safety point of a real diagnosis is this tells parents immediately, I've got to find solutions that treat the brain.
Hmm.
If you're given autistic, what is that? There's no where is it, how, to what degree. So parents know, only look for treatment that affects the brain. All the rest of it, don't go to the medicine cabinet, because that's not going to make the brain better. Parents know they can narrow their search to those treatments that are designed to treat the brain, to make the brain better, to cause brain maturation.
Okay, but professionals apparently maybe are even, I mean, if parents are struggling to find solutions, it doesn't seem that many physicians have these solutions as well, because parents many times receive this label that we were talking about, the labels, and immediately they receive this prediction coming from this fatidic crystal ball that you mentioned. So what can parents do? How can they learn what they need to do to fix the,
Well,
to
for,
make brain
from
grow?
our viewpoint, for parents who really want a solution, first they need to know what the problem is. But once they understand the problem is in the central nervous system, then they need to learn about brain growth and development.
Hmm.
And that's what we've spent our entire 68 years laying out, that pathway, so parents can understand the brain, understand how it grows, why it grows the way it does, and actually be able to apply a solution right at home with their own child.
So I mean, there is the book that we were talking about a little bit earlier, what to do about your child, your brain in your child, a book written by your father, Glenn Doman, which is kind of our guiding manual of how to get started on this. And of course, Marlene, who is helping us with the chat and the comments, is also already sharing how you can schedule a free consultation if you still have doubts about if my son, my daughter is really brain injured, if your child is really one of our children. But there's also something else that parents can do, right, Janet? We have online courses right now. We have our online course, what to do about your brain injured child, coming up very soon.
Yes, we do have one coming up very soon. And yes, of course, we welcome, up until recently, we would welcome our parents to the beautiful Valentine Auditorium. We will certainly look forward to doing that in the future. But for right now, because it's much, much easier for our parents, we have made our course online, and it's an intensive course that really takes parents through the entire understanding of brain growth and development, why the things that were done in the past didn't work, because many of our parents, most of our parents, have been everywhere. They've tried everything. And yeah, they've gotten a bit cynical on things that are supposed to work that don't work. And time is running out for their kids. They feel that way. So we look at why those things in the past didn't work and what really is a workable plan. And we teach them not only brain growth and development, but a specific program to improve mobility, a specific program for their child's intellectual growth and social growth, and a specific program for their physiology, their health, their nutrition, oxygenation, all the kinds of things that the brain needs to be healthy and to function at the top level. So that's what this course does. And every step along the way, parents ask questions. It is a live course. So this full clinical staff are there, and we are there to answer their questions and to get their kid on a pathway. Our goal by the end of the course, every kid has a program, every kid's ready to get started. Mom and dad have their own staff member assigned to them to coach them along the way. And it's a very exciting week, and it's a life-changing week. It's a life-changing week for our parents. I think many parents come through the door and they've almost lost that last little shred of hope. It's almost been beat out of them. And by the end of the course, all that hope is back. All that enthusiasm, all the dreams they have for their kids to have a real life, are back, and they're ready to
Alongside
fight.
with a very strong battle plan.
Yes, a very strong battle plan. And it's a big program. It's a lot of work. But
Mhm.
as a mother I talked to just a few weeks ago said, I would, her child has now graduated, but she said, I would do it 100 times over. There's a huge amount of work. I do it 100 times over, because to see my kid now walking, to see my kid now talking, you can't put a price on that. And we agree. That's why we do what we do, because it's the greatest job in the world. We love it.
and and of course, as we mentioned before, um, you can schedule a free consultation by phone to learn more about the course, learn more about the programs, learn more about the book, or just to learn, if you still have doubts, if you are thinking right now, well, I'm not sure if what my child has is really brain injury or not, or we can help you one by one, to give you this information, and maybe shed some ideas on what you're thinking and what you're going through. And now I think it's time to get some of the questions. So I can see that there are many questions on the chat right now, and please go ahead if you have not written your question. It's now or never. It's now the time to do it. But I would like to start with one that we got from email, and this is a question from Bernard from Arizona, and he writes: "Is lazy also a label? My daughter's teacher says she is lazy. She's in school, but I can see she struggles and doesn't like it. I believe that she is not lazy, but has other kind of problems."
Well, it's terrible, but if you have learning problems, um, in school, you can't do the things that the kid to the right, the kid to the left, the kid in front can do. No one in that environment, or virtually no one, understands why you have that problem. A very small injury to the brain can create a gigantic academic problem. A very small visual problem, not a problem with the eye itself, but a problem created in the brain where both eyes don't work together perfectly. This could create a catastrophe for the kid because he can't see the words, or the words are flipping over.
Mhm.
But very often this kid goes completely undiagnosed. And so he doesn't do well in first grade. By second grade, he's at the bottom of the class. By third grade, if he's allowed to go to third grade, he's hating school. And in each step along the way, no matter how good the teachers are, in their heart of hearts, they look at this kid and they think, well, he's lazy, or maybe he's a little crazy, or maybe he's just stupid. So these kids get those three words: lazy, crazy, stupid.
And stupid.
Lazy, crazy, stupid. And if somebody tells you something frequently enough, with intensity over a long enough duration,
Oh my
one
God, I
day
see where you are going.
one day that kid wakes up And he says, I'm lazy, I'm crazy, I'm stupid.
and
And
he
he's
believes
none of
it.
those things. He's none of those things.
And
Of
that's a
all the
lie,
kids,
yes.
all the kids we treat, the two scariest kids, kid in a coma, scary because he will move back and forth between life and death at flash of an eye. But the other kid who scares us to death is that kid who's in school. He looks like everybody else.
Yes.
He's expected to do what everybody else can do, and he cannot. And he has no idea why. Mom has no idea why. Teacher has no idea why. So it all ends up lazy, crazy, stupid. And you can fix this kid, 6 months, 12 months. I mean, he's compared to a child who's blind and deaf and paralyzed. Would we rather go out in the waiting room and see a few of these kids? Of course we would. Their problems are tiny, but if they're not solved, they will go through life
They carry over.
always with their nose pressed against the glass, always watching their brother have a real life, their sister have a real life. Um, it's really tragic, and all because we're not diagnosing the problem. It's a little neurological problem. It can be fixed. It should be fixed, and that's the reality.
It's infuriating. Parents get these news from doctors all the time. It's either you cannot do anything about it, it's never going to change, he's never going to do this or that, or he or she will outgrow the problem by itself. And at the end, none of these things
No,
are true.
no.
Let's go to one of the questions that we have here from the parents here. And this is from Liliana de Melo, and she is asking, a 7-year-old autistic boy can still start the program and recover, or it should be between the first 5 years of life? Is there still hope?
Okay. I'm so happy to have this question because I think parents now know the first 6 years of life are critical, and they are. I mean, this is when the brain is growing at its fastest. This is when stimulation and opportunity are so easy. Everything's easy for a 4-year-old. But the idea that you can't fix the brain after this time period is not true. We began our work with 60, 70, and 80-year-old stroke patients, and we got them much better. That's what encouraged us to go on and to switch to children, because we figured here we are fixing a 70-year-old while a 3-year-old is going off to an institution. So, no, your 7-year-old is not over the hill. No, no, no. We had a mom here with a 15-year-old this week, and he's doing great. He's having a new life compared to the life he had before. He's 15. So I don't think your 7-year-old is over the hill. Not at all. There is still oodles of hope. And I would also like to say, for those of you who have kids who have been diagnosed as autistic,
Mm-hmm.
this group of children, and again, it's a generalization, but one I'm willing to make. This group of children have very big problems in the gut. So everything you feed him matters. So you really want to take a look at his diet, because that can make a big difference for him right now. And the second thing I want to say, this group of children, they have no intellectual problems. They have no
No
intellectual problems.
intellectual problems.
They
Okay,
have
that's
no,
important.
they are very, very intelligent.
Right, and smart.
And it's extremely important that the people around these kids know that they're extremely intelligent. Okay?
Okay, we have here two questions still on the topic of autism, and these are from Benil Yalamarthi. I am going to show you both of them. The first one is, does auditory hyposensitivity cause global developmental delay? And the other one is, what kind of autism does get better at the Institute? Is it the sensory side or the motor side also, speech?
Okay, let's go back to the first.
The first one, does auditory hyposensitivity cause global developmental delay?
No, brain injury causes these problems. So, it's not a sensory problem, doesn't cause of course, if you're not taking in information on the sensory side, if you're blind, you're not taking in visual information, but the cause of the blindness is injury to the brain. So again, we don't have to make it complicated. The problem is in the sensory nervous system. That's where we have to treat it. And as we treat it, all of the symptoms start to disappear.
Great. Okay. So,
Second
related to, oh, second part of the question.
one,
Yes. Let's go to it. It's, what kind of autism does get better at the
okay,
institutes?
there isn't a kind of autism because autism doesn't exist. It's a silly, ridiculous label that should be, that we should have some kind of huge party and burn the word autism and all promise we'll never use it again because it just creates this kind of confusion. It's an injury to the brain, and the question is, can it be severe? Can it be profound? Can it be moderate? Can it be mild? So, and any injury to the brain, we will see sensory problems, and we will almost certainly see motor problems. So I hope that's an answer to this question.
And also, here is a comment, not really a question, but Jolise Fraser says, this program is the only program I did that got my son sleeping through the night. I'm thankful for you guys.
Well, it's interesting to say that because, parents often ask, what's the thing we'll see first when we start the program? And for those kids who do have sleep problems, and there are many who do, I think that is often the very first good change in the first few months of the program that we see with our kids, that all of a sudden they're sleeping much, much better. And of course, this is critical. A household where you've got a kid not sleeping, nobody's sleeping. And it's devastating.
And it also a good night's sleep on everyone's side also helps the child, of course, to learn more and take in more information and be more alert and ready to do the program. There are so many questions coming. I'm so happy. Here we have another one from MCG. Can the IQ of a baby or child with trisomy 21 be increased to a high IQ with your program? Very interesting question.
I like this one because Raimundo Veras, my father's chosen brother, a great doctor who brought his son here when his son had an injury many, many years ago. He went back to Brazil and created the institutes in Brazil. And when we began to treat the first trisomy 21 children, our own medical team here started to give my father bad time. They said, you can't be treating kids with genetic problems. It's, we don't treat genes. And my father explained, but they were having none of it. So my father went to Raimundo and they made a little conspiracy. He said, I want you to go back to Brazil and I want you to treat 100 trisomy 21 kids and then come back and report to us in a year. Raimundo went back, and being Raimundo, he did not take 100 kids. He took 200 trisomy 21 babies. And when he came back a year later, he was furious, I would say, when he did his paper, his lecture for our World Organization meeting. He said, how dare we not take these children? How dare we question? If we start at birth, if we start young with these children, the goal should be by 12 months, they should be clearly superior in some areas, especially intelligence. And of course, that is the goal for these kids. We never make the goal to be average in intelligence for any brain injured child. The goal for all of our kids is to be intellectually significantly above average. And I'm happy to say we pretty uniformly achieve that pretty rapidly. In part because the well kid is not doing nearly as well as he should be doing. So to be above average is not very difficult. And also because hurt kids are much smarter than anybody knows they are.
Yes. And I was just going to add to that of course we do that as well with children who have not been diagnosed as having a problem. So this program is great even for little brothers and sisters at home.
Yes.
All the family gets a race, so
Right.
to speak. It's the hour now, but I think that
No.
we should take the last question. It's very and I'm sorry we didn't get to all of your questions, but we're going to keep doing this every month or so. So you will, if you are part of the database, you will receive the invitation with the time and everything you need to know of when we're going to connect again. And we will get back to your questions, or better yet, schedule a call, a free consultation call, and get that question answered by
Yes.
our staff directly to you. And you could do it right now. You could click on that link and schedule now your free consultation and have that question solved, or at least have some more light on it.
Yes.
So the last question for today, from Carito: are you still doing the treatment at the institute, or is it only online?
Oh my goodness. Um, we haven't changed one iota how our kids are treated. We have never treated our kids here. Our parents come here with their child. We evaluate the child. We diagnose. We design a treatment program, very extensive one. And then we teach parents how to do every part of that program. So our program is entirely done at home by mom and dad. But that's the way it's been around here for half a century. And yes, we still have kids in our clinic right now. So we really couldn't treat our kids online. That would be rather difficult, I think.
Well, it's time to leave now, but I am happy to report that this webinar is going to stay right here where you are watching. So you could use the same link. You can watch it again. You can share it with anyone you think will take advantage of this information. And remember that we will keep doing this. So keep coming and keep sending us your questions. We will be thrilled to help you and your family with your child and with that problem that you feel you have, so you never feel alone again. Thank you so much, Janet. This was fun. I very much look forward to our next episode coming up next month.
Yeah, and I also would love feedback from anyone about the subjects we're covering, because we want to cover the things that are really needed and wanted. My thinking is maybe the next one we will do on nutrition, because this is always a big area for our mothers and kids. So I'd love to know the things that our parents want to hear about.
Yes, we had actually a couple of questions on nutrition that we were not able to go to, but that's wonderful news. Next time it's going to be nutrition. That's a date. Okay, well, thank you so much again, everyone, for coming here. And thank you, Janet, for this lovely conversation.
Pleasure. My pleasure.
Bye bye. See you very soon next month.